Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Today we're going to be working on a Penn Fierce III 3000 size fishing reel. And it's a nice reel. It's in for its annual service. So we're going to take this reel apart. We're going to show you how to keep it serviced and how to keep it fishing for a long time to come. And we're going to start by removing the exterior pieces and parts. I'm going to start by taking off the spool. To do that, you take the drag adjuster knob and you turn that in a counterclockwise manner. Just walk that spool up until you feel that it's disconnected, and then you can set that aside. We're going to service that spool a little bit later, but for now we're going to go into the case and we're going to make sure that this reel is properly cleaned, lubricated, and well, if there's any broken pieces or parts, replace those, and make sure that it's kept fishing for some time to come. I'm going to start by putting a little towel on here. The towel is a little bit dirty. I've been servicing a couple of reels today, and I thought this would be a good one to do a video on. But when I take that handle off, spray that joint where the collapsible handle is. You can also put a little bit of penetrating oil onto the seam where the knob is, and just give it a spin. Make sure that it works itself in. Once I take that, the bigger parts you can take off and put on your table, but the smaller ones you want to make sure that you have a system for what you're going to do with those small screws and pieces. I use a parts tray. I would recommend that you develop a strategy before you start taking pieces and parts off as to what you do, and well, that'll help you when it comes time to reinstall. We just removed the bump guard, and now we're going to remove the 3 side plate screws. So the Fierce is in the middle of the good, better, best strategy on the Penn, Battle, Fierce, and Pursuit lines. The Pursuit reel is kind of the lower, the good reel. The Fierce is the better reel, and the Battle in that series is the best reel. And there's not that much difference between them. Some of them is the metal versus the graphite case. Used to be a ball bearing. Those are pretty much gone. Used to be that the Pursuit and the Fierce had felt drags, and the Battle had HT100 drags. But in the newest version, the Fierce 3, the Fierce 3 now has the Carbon-Tex hybrid HT100 washers as well. Looks like this reel hasn't been used very much. This is the internal case, and we just removed the case to get your first look inside. This is a good place to tell you to take pictures along the way if you're not familiar with the reel that you're working on, or if you just want a reference point so that you know in the event that you get stuck somewhere, just go back to that reference point and look and see the orientation of the piece, or what sequence it came out in, or whatever. Remove the screw from the crosswind block, pull up and out on the axle shaft, and then wipe the axle shaft clean. That'll go into my parts tray with the screw that I took off. And now we can remove the inner pieces. That's your main gear, which has a bearing on it. Wipe them down. Underneath that bearing, you'll see when I just wipe that down that there are 3 screws, shim washers, not screws, but there's 3 shim washers, and that takes out the slack of managing of the manufacturing variances. Now the gears are all made within a certain tolerance, and those shims are just there to make up that little bit of difference in the variation on that manufacturing. Put the shims back onto that main gear. I'm going to take a cotton swab now and clean out the old grease that's puddled inside the well of that main gear. That grease doesn't do anybody any good in there, so we're going to just clean that up, and we're going to remove that as part of the service. We're also going to oil the bearing that is on that main gear, and well, we can actually put that bearing right back on there, and then set that aside for now. I do oil bearings, I don't grease them, and that's because grease attracts dirt and debris and holds it, and well, to me, I want to avoid getting that kind of stuff inside of a bearing. So Yes, you do need to lubricate the bearings more frequently than with grease, but it also has the advantage of the grease being a little bit more attractive, if you will, in terms of the dirt and the like. So oil has a nice slip to it, but it will evaporate before grease does. So just be aware of that as you're working on that. The other thing we want to do down here is just clean up the old grease that's in the back of the case. So when you're spinning a reel, the gears are going round and round, and centrifugal force works. Centrifugal force is going to spin the grease off of those gears and throw it onto the side plate like it's doing here. And I just want to mop that up before we re-grease. Using a series of things, cotton swabs, penetrating oil as a degreaser, and just kind of getting rid of the old grease in the case. And then a final wipe down here with a paper towel. Should make that nice and clean and ready for reinstall. We have a bearing on the back of the case. We want to do the same thing there. We want to oil that bearing, and then we can come up top here so that we can remove the rotor and service that stack. First thing we want to do is remove the tie down screw and clip. And again, find a nice spot in your parts tray to hold those pieces. Next up, we want to remove the rotor nut. And underneath the rotor nut, there should be a little ferrule. It's a guide right here. It's a guide for your axle shaft. It's a little plastic part. Be sure as you're working on this that you don't lose that piece. Otherwise, there's going to be some excessive wobble in your shaft. With the piece off, we can remove the rotor. Now, I tested this before we got started. It's working fine. Inside of the rotor is clean. I'm just going to put some penetrating oils on the seams and on that line roller, and then just work it in. If the bail is running fine, you do not need to remove the bail arms and the pieces that are the triggers for that. You simply need to put a little bit of oil in there to flush out whatever dirt might be around, and we'll just keep it lightly lubricated. There's 3 screws that hold on the pinion gear assembly. That assembly includes a couple of bearings, high and low. It has the anti-reverse clutch, and it has the inner ring, the race for that clutch, as well as, of course, the pinion gear. I'm going to take that off. And what we're doing here is it's the basic service, which includes cleaning, inspection, and re-lubrication. That's the key to keeping your reels running fine. All right, so we have the collar off, the 3 screws. That's our crosswind block, crosswind gear. And I'm just going to leave these pieces right here because we're going to take this out and put it right back in. This is your assembly. We have the upper part, which is the sealed ball bearing, so you don't need to do anything with that. A shim washer that goes on top of that bearing and underneath the rotor. This is a collar underneath. Notice on this collar that it's got an indent in it. That's going to be because you have a raised sleeve on your anti-reverse clutch. Underneath you have a bearing that's a shielded bearing, so we will lubricate that with some oil. And underneath that there is a shim washer on the shaft here. We want to do the same thing that we've been doing, cleaning. I'm going to use a hard bristle brush to clean the tracks of the teeth. Inspect them to make sure that they're all nice and tight, that they're all uniform, that there's no chips or warps or cracks or anything like that in there. And that does happen depending on the type of reel and its use. If this reel gets snagged up and you try to power out of a snag, you can damage that pinion gear. All right, pinion gear greased. Again, there's a shim washer underneath, and then a shielded bearing, not a sealed one, so this one can get oiled. On your anti-reverse clutch, you don't do anything with that clutch. It's a friction-driven one, so don't oil it. You have an inner sleeve, and you have a plastic bottom on one side and a metal bottom or top on the other. The metal side faces up on this reel. If you put it in upside down, your reel will do wonders turning backwards, and it'll dead stop as you try to make it go forward. They use that upside down on lefty reels in certain applications. All right, on the collar, as we mentioned, there's an indent. That's the one that goes low. The sealed bearing goes in, and then the shim washer for the rotor goes in. Before you put that back in, just make sure your case is nice and clean. This is a good opportunity to do that. Get some of the old greases off of there. Also check underneath. When you remove that gear, you do have an opportunity, if there is any dirt back there, to reach in there and get that, whatever might be remaining in there of the dirt. Take your assembly and bring that in. Make sure that it is flush to the top rim of the case. Next thing you want to do is bring the collar back in now, and we have 3 small Phillips head screws. Get your driver and bring those in. Make sure that they're all aligned and that they're brought down tight. We have 2 more of those. So Fierce has been around a while now. This is the 3rd version. I think they actually have come out with a 4th version. And a lot of times I get asked, well, why aren't you working on the Penn Fierce IV? Well, when they come out with a new one, those reels are covered under warranty for about a year for any mechanical breakage. And, well, if you're doing your servicing on your reel, a year is about the right time. So I guess I will see the 4s coming up in the near future. But for now, that's why I don't work on them. Don't need to. And then if somebody calls me with a 4 and tells me they have something that broke in it, the first thing I generally do is tell them to check with Penn and see if it's covered under warranty. There's no sense paying for a service if the warranty is going to cover that issue. Okay, here we are. We've got a main gear that we've cleaned. I'm going to use fishing reel grease. I use Penn Precision Reel Grease. That's the blue grease. I use that pretty much for all of my reel service. It doesn't matter which fishing reel grease you use, to me anyway. But what does matter is that you use fishing reel grease. It's got the marine qualities in it that are going to protect your reel going forward. Before I put the main gear in, I want to put the rotor back on. Rotate it so that it sits nice and easy over the shaft of the pinion gear. Bring your little coupling or ferrule in. And then I like this a lot. This is the rotor cap nut, and it actually has a top so that you can't over tighten this. Tighten it down snug, give it a spin, make sure that it turns nice and free and easy, and then get the cap collar and your tight end screw. And this is where my parts tray helps tremendously, because I can just simply go in there, grab the screw and tighten it down. I'm not searching all over my bench for it. And if you leave pieces and parts on the bench, speaking from experience, those parts will from time to time get knocked around. And if they get knocked around, you may be searching for them for some time. Or worse yet, you may have to go order another one because you lost it. All right. Same thing, we're going to get grease on all sides of this oscillation gear. Underneath, where it's going to ride on the stud, the teeth where it's going to intersect with the main gear, the face where the crosswind block is going to ride up and down. Bring that in, and when you do that, make sure that the stud is facing low. Next up, we can bring in the oscillation gear. That's got the groove in it, and that's where the stud is going to ride. So let's take a moment here to grease that up. And make sure that you seat the stud inside that groove when you go to put your crosswind block on. There we go. That's how that should seat. We've greased up the back end of your bearing. We've oiled the one inside. We'll put our main gear in now. can deal with the axle. We've wiped the axle off. It's clean. Very light coating of grease onto the axle. Anything more than that light coating, it's going to scrape off on that furrow that went in there. It's going to hold it tight. Bring it in and down. Make sure that you align the hole in your axle shaft with the hole in the crosswind block. And get that little screw. Tighten that up to hold that in. If you like, at this point, you can give it a spin. Make sure that everything's turning nice and easy and it's not getting caught on anything. If it did, stop and reset yourself. We'll take our case now and bring that in. We have 3 screws and that bump guard left on the case. When we complete that part of the service, what we will do is service the drag system in this reel. Now these screws have a little transparent washer on the end of them. It helps keep the water out of the case. Make sure that as you're installing this that you didn't leave that washer in your parts tray or on the bench or wherever. Make sure that it's on that screw. Alright. I use a couple of different screwdrivers. The one that's the red handle is that Japanese industrial standard one. That's for the ones that have the through screw. Sometimes it's easier for me to loosen the screw with that, but then I switch over to the other screwdriver because I like the feel of the handle. It's a little bit easier for me to work with than that kind of a ball knob there. To each our own, right? All right, bring this in. Make sure they're all nice and tight. Let's bring our cap back on. Cap screw. Well, if you have any questions on this reel or any reel, if you're wondering about how the reel is used, if you have any questions about any additional service on this reel, or maybe you're thinking of buying it and want to know a little bit more about the specs or something like that, just leave those kind of questions in the comment section. If you have a question on any reel, you can use this comment section to ask those questions as well. I do try to answer those questions in the morning, and well, if you leave them, I will try to respond. Maybe you're working on a different reel and you're having a problem, just leave it there. I'll try to do my best to get you back on track. All right, I'm going to remove that clip. And then this is a 6-washer set. It's got HT100 washers in it. And in this one, the newer versions of these reels now have the washer acting as the eared washer, the drag washer. Where in the past you would have a different set of metals doing that. And I guess the thinking on that is that you get equal compression with the metals. The interesting thing here is this is only a 4-washer set. Kind of surprised by that. The Battle probably has a 6-washer set, so this one has a little bit less max drag to it. All right, put some grease onto the washer, make sure it's nice and clean. Clean up the first of the metals. I'm using a dry grease. You don't have to use a dry grease. You can use a regular fishing reel grease if you don't have it. You don't need to run out and buy it. Penn puts their own dry grease on there. It doesn't use something different. All right, yeah, so we only have a 4 drag washer set in this one. So that will reduce the max drag. Max drag is a function of surface area. So the more drag washers you have, the more surface area you have, the more max drag you have. Same thing with the size of the washers. The bigger the washers, the more surface area you will have, and that will also increase max drag. All right, we've cleaned the inside of the case. We've reset the spool. Bring this on, tighten that down. So the Fierce have been around a while now. They're very, very dependable reels at I'll call it a value price. They're under $100. And for a reel that's going to give you the quality and dependability of the Fierce reel at that price range, it's a good purchase. All right, bring that on. Tighten down the reel. Make sure that the drags are holding, and then back them off. You don't want to compress those drags and squeeze out all of the greases and oils you just put in there. When you're not fishing the reel in between trips, back that drag off. Nice smooth reel. Nice, easy turning, smooth functioning reel. This one's ready to go fishing again. Well, I hope you've enjoyed it. Again, this is the Fierce III. It's the 3000 size, I think. 3000 size. And that's how you take it apart, service it, and help it to keep fishing for a very long time to come. Before I leave, I want to thank our first responders, our police, fire, safety, rescue, and everybody involved in keeping us out of harm's way. I want to thank all the viewers that have made this channel possible by subscribing and by watching. I appreciate your comments. Please leave them in the comment section, and have a great day. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle.